Welcome to the Major Margins Podcast, a podcast about how to increase your profits in a major way. Each week, we'll cover all things about managing your funds, increasing your profits, and to create healthy cash flow in your business and life. We'll have your favorite entrepreneurs talk about how they transform their money and business for the better. And I'm your host, Ayana Vaughn. Hello, and welcome back to the Major Margins Podcast. I'm super excited. I hope you liked the first episode. And I want to get into today's topic. I want to get back to the basics. If you know this already, I applaud you. And if not, I am not judging. And I just wanted to create a super clear episode about something that we use interchangeably in the world of online business. And that is revenue versus profit. So I'm not going to get into extreme details, but what I found is that a lot of times people in online business think of their revenue as profit. And I want to tell you that revenue and profit are totally two different things, because in business, you have more than just revenue that is basically money that you can, quote, spend. So let's get into it. Revenue is money that you earn when doing a service or product or whatever have you. And there are two types of ways that you have revenue. We have cash-based, which is basically what we use in online business and for tax purposes, because that's actual cash that is in your bank. And then we have something called accrual. Accrual-based revenue is basically what you've earned, but you have not yet received that cash. Now, my friend, Jerisha Hawk, who I look up to, she has a term that makes it extremely easy for you to understand the difference between the two. So she calls cash-based revenue banked, and then she calls accrual-based revenue booked, because she's booked it and she knows that she's expecting it. And that's why it's super important to understand what invoices you have outstanding, because that is money that you've earned and you need to get that in cash banked, so that you can have it in your actual bank account. Now, profit. There is a little journey that happens before we get to profit, and that includes something called direct expenses. So that is expenses that directly relates to your revenue. So for me, in my bookkeeping firm, I have my software that I use for my clients to actually provide the service, as well as my bookkeeping staff who help me produce the service. Those are my direct costs. Also, your transaction fees. So when you're using something like PayPal or Stripe, there is a merchant fee that is attached to it to even be able to allow you to receive that income. So those are direct expenses. And then we have something called operating expenses. So operating expenses are the expenses that you use to generally operate the business. They don't necessarily go into directly relating to the revenue source, but they help you just keep your business in operations. And that could be something like software subscription to your email marketing provider. Depending on how you might use it, you might say, oh, I need that to make money, but you could probably run your business without it. You could probably get something free. So something like that. Or you do meals, you go out to travel, you have your rent, if you're renting a office space, other things like that. And just to give you some more examples on expenses, we have something called fixed expenses. So that in your business is something like overhead. That's basically what you know that you're going to spend every single month, no matter what, whether you make $0 or $10,000 in that month, that overhead and those fixed expenses will remain the same. And that could be if you are you have a salon or you're in retail and you have rent to pay every single month, no matter how much money you're making. Your admin team, they're the same every month if they're on salary, just things like that. Your phone bill, all those fixed expenses that are the same every single month. And then we have something called variable expenses. Now that means that it varies from month to month. Now, variable expenses can be like your advertising. Maybe you're not spending much in this section or this quarter, but you're going to spend more in another quarter. Or sometimes, depending on your business model, if advertising is your bread and butter, I've seen where accountants have put advertising as a direct expense because you actually get your clients from advertising. And without it, you wouldn't have that revenue source. So it depends on how you see it. So that's how you travel from revenue to profit. So you have your revenue, direct expenses, your operating expenses, and then you get your operating income, which can be like operating profit. Then we have something called other income, other expenses. That's not a huge category in the online world. So a lot of times your operating income, which is after your operating expenses, you have your net income. A lot of times that's the same number. So that is your profit. And if you are taxed as a single member LLC, then that's your profit. And that is potentially what you can use to, in a sense, pay yourself. Now, we will get into another podcast about cash flow management and how that is different. But I do want to tell you that there is a huge difference between revenue and profit. If you're seeing something on your dashboard in Stripe, that is not your profit. That is your net revenue after you have your refunds and your transaction fees. Okay? You also have your PayPal. That is not your profit. That is before you have your expenses. So please, please, please repeat after me. Profit is not revenue because profit comes after your expenses. Look in the mirror, say this to yourself. I don't want you to get confused out here. It is not everyone's fault that they're getting confused about this, but I want to give you some love and tell you that these are two separate things. And in the next one, we will talk more about what is profit margins, because those are something that are near and dear to my heart. I like to say that profit margins and percentages rule my life. So I'm excited to tell you about that in the next podcast. I also want to add that if you are wanting a more detailed description on this, because this lies in the profit and loss statement, I will go over this because I believe in visuals. This will be a little bit harder to do in audio. I would love to have you in the Major Margins Club. That is our Facebook group. And I will give you a more in-depth overview of how to go over this in the statement called the income statement. And this is a financial statement that helps you understand these things with the revenue, expenses, and profit, and all of the different ways that you can understand the business health. And that is just one piece, because we have several different financial reports that you should look at as a business owner. But yes, come over to the Major Margins Club in the Facebook group, and we'll be happy to have you. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and subscribe. I would love to hear your feedback and just also get to know a little bit more about you. I am on Instagram at the Ayana, and we have our business page at Lovely Financials. And DM us if you have any other things that you have questions on, anything you want us to hit on for podcast ideas. I would love to serve you. All right, bye. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us on this week of the Major Margins Podcast. Check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Lovely Financials and at lovelyfinancials.com to learn more about mastering your cash flow. I'd really appreciate if you rate and subscribe to catch every new episode. See you next Tuesday.